Here at Live Golf Adelaide, Phil Mickelson. Phil, great to see you back down here again. Now, I've always wanted to ask Phil a couple of questions about...
On June 26, 2026, something shifted in professional golf. A veteran journalist named Alan Shipnuck published an investigation built from interviews with 19 sources into the private conduct of one of the sport's most beloved figures, Phil Mickelson. 3 days later, his team responded with a statement that centered not on him, but on his wife of 35 years, Amy Mickelson, her grace, her love, her unwavering support. Within 2 weeks, Mickelson was out of the Open Championship, missing all 4 major tournaments in a single season for the first time since 1990. To understand how this happened, you have to go back to the beginning, because this story only makes sense if you see how far the ground has shifted beneath a man once considered untouchable. Phil and Amy Mickelson married in 1996 before he'd won a single major. They raised 3 children together, and for decades, Amy played a specific role in the public imagination, the quiet constant, rarely speaking to the press, always present at the 18th green. Phil was the performer. Amy was the anchor. Then, in 2009, everything changed. Amy was diagnosed with breast cancer, and Phil stepped away from the tour to be at her side. Those images of him choosing family over fame transformed him. He stopped being just a great golfer. He became, in the public mind, proof that stardom didn't have to corrode a person's character. That image had a stage to match it. In 2013, Mickelson won the Open Championship at Moorfield, a victory he called the most meaningful of his career, and turned to embrace Amy and their children beside the green. In 2021, at 50 years old, he became the oldest major champion in history. It looked, from the outside, like a story with no cracks. But public images are curated, and the version of Phil Mickelson the world thought it knew was about to be tested by things no one watching that hug at Moorfield could have imagined. The test came on June 26, 2026. Shipnuck's investigation, published on the golf site Scratch, centered on an allegation professional golf had quietly whispered about for years but never seen attached to a name. That name was Ashley Perez, the former wife of golfer Pat Perez. According to her account, during the 2015 Barclays tournament, she and her husband stayed at a villa Mickelson had invited them to. One evening, after Pat Perez stepped away, Ashley alleges Mickelson showed her an explicit photo of himself and told her he'd leave his bedroom door open that night. She says she refused, and she says she waited, deliberately, until the tournament ended before telling her husband anything, not wanting to disrupt his competition. Pat Perez, she says, never confronted Mickelson directly, but the story spread quietly through the sport for years. Eventually, according to Ashley Perez, Mickelson apologized to Pat Perez, first in person, then in a lengthy phone call. She recorded 26 minutes of that call and shared it with Shipnuck as corroboration. Suddenly, an old, cryptic interview made sense. Back in 2022, Pat Perez had told a podcast he held a different hate for Phil than most people, describing a line that had been crossed, one he called unforgivable. For 4 years, almost no one understood what he meant. Now they did. Mickelson's team disputes the framing entirely. They say the reporting left out a critical detail from that recorded call. That when the photo was described as fully nude, Mickelson immediately pushed back, asking, "You mean topless?" They argue that his willingness to apologize should not be read as an admission of everything alleged. The apology itself isn't in question. What it was actually for, that's where the two sides diverge completely. Ashley Perez has said she came forward because a culture of silence protects powerful men, and that adulation and money can convince someone they are untouchable. But the Barclays allegation was only one part of the investigation. The rest examined something else. 3 golf clubs Mickelson had quietly left in recent years, each under circumstances that raised questions. In June, Golf Digest reported he was no longer a member at the Farms Golf Club near San Diego, after a female employee accused him of unwanted physical contact, an incident the club says it investigated and acted on immediately, confronting him mid-round. Mickelson's team says any misunderstanding was resolved, and that he resigned. Separately, Shipnuck's reporting described his 2021 exit from a Madison club as something ordered by Amy herself through the couple's wealth management firm after allegations that another woman had stayed overnight at his property. And at a third club, The Bridges, members quoted in a report described something more calculated. Mickelson allegedly paying a young employee to drive his phone around the course for hours, so that location tracking would make it appear he was playing golf while he was reportedly elsewhere entirely. Mickelson's representatives reject all of it. In a statement issued July 2nd, they said he has never been expelled from any club, that his memberships were never revoked, and that the idea Amy orchestrated any of it is false. They called phone location sharing an ordinary family feature used by millions, not evidence of deception. And they insisted Amy Mickelson is not a public figure, never sought this attention, and should never have been pulled into the story at all. Which brings us to the statement that generated the biggest headlines of all, the one issued 3 days after the investigation, invoking Amy's extraordinary grace and unwavering love and describing Phil's priority as becoming the husband, father, and man his family deserves. Many outlets framed it as Amy breaking her silence. But look closely at who actually signed it, not Amy, but Phil's spokesperson and his attorney. Amy Mickelson has said nothing publicly, not one word. Her silence, in that sense, is exactly as intact as it always was. It was simply spoken over at the moment her husband's reputation faced its greatest scrutiny. And notably, that same statement conceded that some allegations were false, while others revisited mistakes already acknowledged. Which ones? The statement doesn't say. By July, this had become open conflict between Mickelson's camp and the golf press, each accusing the other of bias and distortion. Meanwhile, the golf itself has all but disappeared. Mickelson played one event in 2026, withdrew from the Masters, the PGA Championship, and didn't attempt to qualify for the US Open. Then came his withdrawal from the Open Championship at Royal Birkdale, the major he's called the most meaningful of all, one he'd played every year since 2009. The result? For the first time since 1990, 2 years before he even turned professional, Phil Mickelson will miss every major championship in a single season. His team has cited a private family health matter, reportedly involving one of his children, a detail that deserves to be treated with care, separate from anything else in this story. What remains is a set of claims that don't fully agree with each other. Some corroborated, some anonymous, some flatly denied, and a family's private pain sitting somewhere underneath all of it. Whether the full truth ever surfaces may depend on whether this eventually reaches a courtroom. But the distance between the image of Moorfield in 2013, Mickelson embracing his family beside the green, and Royal Birkdale in 2026, where his name doesn't appear in the field at all, is not really in dispute. That distance is the story, and what happens next, for him and for the people around him, is still being written.